It's what bothers people about this Palantir thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday.
Yeah.
The Palantir thing is very odd.
A lot of people feel that this is the precursor to a social credit score, a digital kind of police state. I just think, Peter Thiel is giving a 4-part lecture on the Antichrist.
Yeah, that seems odd.
4-part. Well, here's what's really wild to me. You build military AI, military drone, autonomous drone technology to export to war zones all over the world. You build domestic surveillance technology to surveil our friends and neighbors. And then your other pet passion is the Antichrist.
They find you when you're young and promising, like J.D.
Well, that's the thing. JD's going to have to, if he wants to be the president, he's going to have to say, Peter Thiel, I'm not.
The Antichrist.
He's going to have to say, Peter Thiel is Satan, and here's why that's good.
All right, so it looks like Joe Rogan has been in damage control mode after all the recent criticism he's been getting, especially from that elephant graveyard video that has 2 million views now. I mean, you could tell this stuff has really been getting to him, and that's why last week he pretended to finally come to the realization that the government is using his podcast to push propaganda. And now I think to respond to all the people claiming that Joe sold out to the tech oligarchs, we have Tim Dillon on his podcast criticizing and making fun of one of Joe's tech oligarch friends/handlers, Peter Thiel. And this is the first time on Rogan's podcast that anybody's really talked about Peter's controversial surveillance company, Palantir, or J.D. Vance's connection to Thiel and how he's basically a Manchurian candidate created by Thiel. I mean, even when Joe had him on his podcast, he didn't ask him any questions about this stuff, and he was defensive of him up until this podcast. So I think he's been hearing the criticism and people saying he sold out to the tech oligarchs, and now he's trying to backpedal. Because last year, almost every week, he'd have on a new tech billionaire that's trying to promote their agenda. But of course, Joe thinks his billionaire friends are the good ones.
I know multiple guys that are billionaires, and they're very nice people. They're very nice, and I can see how it happens.
But you're also friends with the cool billionaires.
Yeah.
You managed to find the cool ones.
Well, Elon's the coolest. He's my favorite billionaire.
And obviously they're friends with him because they're just trying to use his podcast, which Peter Thiel had been doing behind the scenes for years. Like, Rogan's been friends with him, I think, since 2018, a couple years before he signed his Spotify deal, which Peter Thiel's a big stakeholder in Spotify. And also a lot of Rogan's guests are connected to him, like have either worked for him, been in business with him, or friends with him, or funded by him. Like, obviously every tech guy Rogan has on is associated with him, and a lot of Rogan's intellectual friends are too. And here are just a few that have mentioned it, and also Rogan talking about going to his house.
What made you want to dedicate so much time on this particular UAP, UFO, lost technology subject?
I was working at Peter Thiel's family office in L.A.
Yeah, my friend Peter Thiel critiques me on this point just as you have. And my boss and good friend Peter Thiel was a supporter of Trump in the last election. I'm taking a huge risk in how much I love this guy, Peter Thiel, and how much he loves me. And people say, oh, okay, you're just a Peter Thiel tool. Well,
a friend of mine, Peter Thiel, and I always argue. He always argues he's like, look, U.S. civilization is declining. You can tell because all the science fiction movies are negative.
The brain in the frying pan.
Yeah, this is your brain.
I remember once having lunch with Peter Thiel, and he was saying he was grown up with that.
The guy who made me feel really dumb and almost like a fraud was
Brendan Schaub.
Not Brendan Schaub, Peter Thiel. I was listening to him talk, and I went. Yeah, I met him. I had dinner at his house, and I was like, he was talking, and I realized that everything I say is basically an amalgam of the things I've read or heard.
And
this
he's
guy
one of the
thinks,
ones that write those things.
Yeah, he just thinks up things on his own.
Well, he started PayPal with Elon. Peter Thiel had a party at his house, and he brought over the guy who wrote Chariots of the God. No, we all had like a lunch around the table. He has these power dinners and power lunches. They're really cool. Where he brings over interesting people and everyone has conversations.
That's the dream.
I went to one of the dinners at his house, and then I went to one of the lunches at his house.
And Thiel is more of a behind-the-scenes guy. He invests in companies, but also people like podcasters, influencers, intellectuals, and politicians. He's arguably one of the most influential people in America. But last year he decided to make an appearance on Rogan's podcast, and all the comments were like, oh, Joe's interviewing his boss finally. Or why isn't Joe asking him about Palantir, J.D. Vance, or his CIA connections? So this is when people are like, all right, he's completely sold out. What even is this podcast? Also, Peter, he just kept malfunctioning the whole time and could barely even answer a question.
You don't feel that climate science is a real science?
It is. it's well, let me. It's I there's several different things one could say. It's
And the only interesting part was when they talked about Epstein, because Thiel, he's met with him before, and it was after he was already a convicted sex offender, which Thiel admits during this podcast, but he leaves out that Epstein actually invested in one of his companies. So he kept trying to downplay Epstein's operation and act like the child sex trafficking wasn't as prevalent as people thought, and we should be more focused on who he's working for and why he's protected.
I don't know. They're all the Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy theories, which I'm probably too fascinated by, because it felt like there was some crazy stuff going on that they were able to cover up,
and still are.
But then, man, doesn't it, the fact that we're still talking about Jeffrey Epstein tell us how hard it is to come up with anything else?
No, because there's no answers.
Probably the sex stuff is overdone and everything else is underdone. It's like a limited hangout. We get to talk about the crazy underage sex, and not about all the other questions. The question isn't about the sex with the underage women. The question is really about why was he so protected? And then I went down all these rabbit holes. Was he working for the Israelis or the Mossad or all this sort of stuff? And I've come to think that was very secondary. It was obviously it was just the U.S. If you're working for Israel, you don't get protected. We had Jonathan Pollard. He went to jail for 25 years or whatever. But
unrelated, right?
Understood. But this is one
particular operation.
It was if it was an intelligence operation, the question we should be asking is what part of the U.S.
And of course, Thiel thinks he was only working for U.S. intelligence. And Joe doesn't say it here, but he said a bunch of times on his podcast that he thinks it was Israeli intelligence. Also, usually when Joe is talking about someone who met with Epstein after he was convicted, he's like, that's insane. I can't believe it. But when Thiel tells him this, obviously he has nothing to say about it. And then he even defends him on another podcast.
The real weird thing is that he just gets out and gets like house arrest.
Yep.
And he gets like a little slap on the wrist, and then he's back in action with all these rich people again.
Yep.
Like really rich, influential people. Like Bill Gates is hanging out with him after he's already been arrested and convicted. Like that's bananas. Yep. And you were introduced to him. How was he described to you?
He was described as one of the smartest tax people in the world.
Interesting.
And I probably was my moral weakness that I.
Well, how could you have known back then? He had never been arrested.
No, this was 2014. It was post arrest.
Oh, so his arrest was the first arrest, right?
Yeah,
which was like
2007, 08.
Okay.
And then after this, Joe had on Kurt Metzger, who's like, man, that guy Peter Thiel you just had on is the biggest liar ever. And Joe's like, what did he lie about? And then Kurt goes into what he was saying about Epstein. So Joe gets really defensive and he has to come up with the biggest cope I've ever heard. This is unbelievable. He says there's no way Peter Thiel could be involved in a blackmail operation or a child sex trafficking operation because he's gay. That's Joe Rogan's defense here.
Peter Thiel, I watched you talk to Peter Thiel. I've never seen someone lie so artlessly and autistically in my life.
What did he lie about?
Oh, dude, I'm going to put this out about Epstein Island. Maybe just some guys were cheating on their wives. Yeah, maybe that's all it was, Peter. Some guys were cheating on their wives.
See, the thing is, he's a gay guy, and he's not interested in going to that island, so he's probably on the outs. And allegedly, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he supposedly ever
that's
went.
not the only game in town.
Oh, I'm sure there's gay blackmail, but you can't when a guy's single and gay, like, what are you going to get on him? That he fucks other guys?
See, that's why they didn't want gay marriage.
Yeah, so that was an interesting take. I guess Joe thinks there are no gay PDF files. I mean, after hearing this, I think Thiel might have blackmail on him, but it seems like Joe might be trying to distance himself a little bit, or at least give the illusion that he's distancing himself from Thiel after this recent podcast with Tim. And at one point, Joe asked Tim about a dinner he turned down with Thiel, and Tim says he just doesn't really trust him. And also, he was complaining about how the tech people never have good food at their dinners. That's definitely a big part of it, too. You know, if you want to win Tim over, you better make sure you have a 5-star feast prepared for him. Like JD Vance, he must have picked a good restaurant to get Tim to go to that meeting with him.
I don't think Peter Thiel eats food like a person. I think it's like he has some type of...
What?
What
do you think?
I think a lot of these tech people, they don't like food. They're not food people, a lot of these tech people. I went to a few of these tech things in Austin, it's not the food's never the thing. They're not like food people. They're not like, ooh, let me eat food. Like wasps are not either. Like real old school, like waspy.
Didn't you get invited to have lunch or something, or dinner with Peter?
Yes, I said no.
Did you?
I said no. I'm a little wary of that circle of people, and I'm not saying there's anything inherently evil about them because obviously there's people in there.
And Tim has to be careful here because Joe's been to the dinners and a lot of his friends have. So when Tim says he didn't want to meet with him because he doesn't really trust him completely, Joe's like, yeah, but you'll take money from Saudi Arabia. So he kind of takes a dig at him. And then Joe talks about how he met with Thiel. And after that, Tim's like, yeah, I didn't want to go because I still want to be able to make fun of him. And Joe's like, oh, do you think that's part of the reason why he invited you? And Tim's like, yeah. And Joe kind of agrees with him. So he's pretending to realize that Thiel's just using him. And then also Tim tries to explain that to him as well.
I'm a little wary of that circle of people, and I'm not saying there's anything inherently evil about them because obviously there's people in there. I don't know that I want to go to a dinner with someone who's going to talk endlessly about the Antichrist.
But yet you'll go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, of course.
And perform.
Of course.
I've been to Peter's house twice.
Yeah.
I went once with dinner with Eric Weinstein. I forget who else.
I'm sure he's a very nice guy. Like Peter Thiel. People that know him go, he's a nice guy. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
I get invited to a lot of dinners and a lot of things. And what I try to do is I try to say to myself, I need to be able to criticize people and make fun of them.
Right.
So, it felt like really weird to go to this guy's house and then shit on him the next day.
Do you think that's part of the strategy of inviting you to go to places?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most likely.
So
Everyone has an agenda, and that's completely understandable. And I think what they try to do is sometimes launder that agenda through some cultural space, however they want to do it,
Yeah.
And that's happened forever. It's not new. It's not unique because there's an internet. 1,000%. There's people that want the world to look a certain way. What he wants, I'm sure it was like a lovely, he goes, I want to talk about the media. And you're like a comedian, but you're in the media and he has a bunch of people to his house. There's probably smart people that go.
Yeah, he likes to have
and they talk about the media.
Big thought, think tank conversations.
Yeah, and I just felt like that didn't appeal to me.
And it's funny Tim even has to explain this to Joe because Joe's explained this a billion times on his podcast, how billionaires have too much power and influence over the media and politics. And also obviously he'll talk about how sketchy it is that they're connected to Epstein. But then right after he gets done talking about this, the next day he'll have on a billionaire that's connected to Epstein that's just trying to use his podcast to gain more influence and power. But of course, they're the good billionaires. They're the good ones that met with Epstein. So also Joe is coping over this by acting like when Peter Thiel first invited him over, his podcast wasn't very popular. There'd be no reason for Thiel to think he's useful. Joe said he wasn't influential at the time, but this was in, I think, 2018 or 2019 possibly. So that's complete bullshit. He had the most popular podcast in the world, and he got that Spotify deal just a year or two later. So it's really weird. He acts like, I was a nobody back then. I wasn't on his radar.
I don't know why he brought me over the house to meet Eric Von Daniken, but I was not that influential back then. I was not someone that you would have on the radar as being the guy who is going to affect presidential campaigns.
Yeah.
I was a MMA commentator who's a dirty comedian who talks shit on the internet.
Right.
That was it. And I had Eric on my podcast before, and that's how Eric and I became friends. And he knew that I had a deep interest in, and I've read Von Daniken's book, I've watched his documentary, and I know that a lot of that stuff has been debunked. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted to bring me over to ask him questions.
Yeah, so Thiel's not going to like this podcast. I mean, they also talked about how he's a Christian, and Tim explained how he's using religion to try to get people on board with AI and transhumanism, which, of course, being religious and pro-transhumanism seems like a massive contradiction, but this guy will make sense out of anything. I mean, also Joe's like, how does he reconcile being gay with being a Christian? That's his biggest hypocrisy. The guy's a walking contradiction. Of course, he's going to find a way to justify anything.
A lot of them.
Thiel?
Yeah, of course.
How does he reconcile that with the gay stuff?
I don't know how anyone reconciles anything with anything, but I think he's, I don't know, but they've realized they have to sell the AI stuff and the eventual augmenting of the biology, all of that to Americans. And there'll probably be a lot of the objections to that will probably be religious or rooted in religion. People going, I don't want to be a, but if you can somehow launder it and go, no, God likes and wants you to have the autonomous drone. You have to position yourself.
Interesting.
I don't know. I'm sure he can reconcile the gay stuff with the way. There's tons of gay Christians. I'm sure he's a very smart guy. He'll be able to figure it out.
That's an interesting strategy.
Well, that's the strategy.
That does make sense, though, as a strategy. That's how you would approach things.
You would have to.
Yeah.
You would have to. You'd have to go out and say, the good news is God wants you to have all of these things, which isn't Christianity. It's some other, they've concocted something else. If you're augmenting your biology to live forever or to live a lot longer, and you are seeding clouds and doing all of this stuff, then you are playing God.
Yeah, so it's wild that Peter Thiel, who's a gay transhumanist immigrant, is one of the most influential people on the right. It's kind of impressive that he pulled this off, considering everything he does and believes in. Like, also, he has an interesting take on transgenderism. Most people on the right would say it's wrong because it's unnatural, but Thiel's criticism of it is basically the opposite of that. He thinks it's still too natural and it doesn't go far enough. And he uses Christianity to try to justify this theory.
I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
this. Should the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina, and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And so,
right. But the other wait. Sorry. The promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace, and the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
Well, it's. Let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament. It is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things.
Yeah, so that's our vice president's handler. Definitely nothing suspicious about him, nothing to worry about. At least that's what Duncan Trussell thinks, one of Rogan's closest longtime friends. He went to one of Thiel's talks about the Antichrist and said he's a completely normal dude, nothing to worry about, and he's pissed that people say he's like the Antichrist. So in Elephant Graveyard's new video, he called Duncan out on this and exposed him, and now Duncan's just been spiraling over it. It's not going well. And I just posted a big video about that over on Patreon. So if you enjoyed this video, want extra content, and want to make sure you stay up to date with everything, that's definitely the best way to do it. It's definitely worth it. Make sure you check it out. I'll put a link in the description.